Yeah, so before I begin the talk, I think it's all going to be kind of blended together. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. Yeah, I was thinking about what's not on my bio for this that I haven't shared yet. My name is on my bio, but I'll just state my name again. It's Ramona Lisa Ortiz Smith. And I'm born in California. I'm a native of California, which is rare, a Bay Area native. At least that's what we say in California. Those of us that are native, and let me honor, meaning there are the natives of the land that we've been honoring as well. And I grew up on what was known as Ohlone territory in Berkeley, California. So, and that brings to mind that I like to mention my native lineage, my indigenous lineage of the Caddo Nation from Louisiana, by way of my father and his parents. My father, John L. Smith, who is deceased, and my grandmother, Leola Smith, and my grandpa, Tom Smith, who migrated out west. Man, if my dad was born in the 30s, then, that was a long time ago when they migrated out this way. And also my El Taino indigenous heritage from what is now Puerto Rico, from my mother's father, Francisco Vasquez Ortiz, and my mom, Carmen Ortiz, who I will be bringing into the talk today. That's what I'm going to talk about. She'll be up. And I'm the youngest of 5 children. I'm my mother's youngest child, her 5th child. And I'm my father's oldest child, his first child. I actually have 3 brothers, and I had 2 sisters. I now have 1. I'll be bringing that sister, who is deceased, into the talk today as well. I was born an auntie. I came out and I was already Auntie Mona. I have a niece that's about 9 months older than me. And I have I'm thinking over 30 nieces, nephews, and great nieces and nephews. And even some of my great nieces and nephews have kids. So I'm a great, great, great aunt. And I hope I'm a great aunt. I do my best. Let's see. I said I was raised in Berkeley, and I like to say I grew up in New York. I moved to New York when I was 18, and I grew up fast. I was a dancer, a professional dancer, a ballerina. Well, I wasn't a ballerina. I was in the corps, but, I was, before brown ballerinas were popular, I was a brown ballerina with a brown ballerina company, brown dance company. And I spent about 13 years in New York, living mostly in Harlem. I spent about 10 years or so in Harlem. And then I spent about maybe 3 years or so in the Boogie Down Bronx, Southeast Bronx. Yeah. So I am a mother. I have a 25-year-old daughter. And I'm sharing all this so that you can kind of get an understanding of where my Dharma, my mindfulness, my journey comes from, what's influenced me, whether I know it or not. These are some of the things that have influenced me. I was married. I am now divorced. Been divorced for years, but just naming that because that influences me. I was a single mom. Am still a single mom, and I loved that journey. Still love it. I identify as a woman. And if I have to pick a sexual orientation, which sometimes I'm invited to do, I say that I'm flexual. I like choice in my life. And I'm also currently happily single and deliberately celibate. And my heart is open to love and relationship. However, I've been spending the last several years just getting to know who I am. Not who I wanted to be, not who I was, not who people expected me to be, not who I became, but who am I now? And the Dharma has helped me explore that. Um, yeah, I live alone happily again. Oh my gosh, for a couple of years I didn't have a place. I was without a residence deliberately. That may come up later in the talk too, but I was caring for my parents, my father. So it didn't make sense for me to have an apartment. He lived in Florida, and it was cheaper to fly back and forth to Florida every month than it was to rent. Um, yeah, my sister has named my place the Retreat House. I'm always on retreat, she says. Sitting on a cushion somewhere is what she really says. And my house is, it's not a house, it's a in-law apartment, which is really sweet with a sweet garden. And it feels like a retreat to me because I finally get to be whew, by myself. Yay. But I love people too. I'll spend a little more time, just a little more time on my, I forgot to start one of my timers here, on my spiritual practice. So I grew up with strong Christian influences. My father was Baptist. I remember going to church with my grandmother, his mother, all the time, loved it, loved the spiritual music. And my mom was brought up Catholic, but she didn't like it as my remembering. And she told us to choose a religion. I was lost for a long time. Literally one time I was in New York trying to get baptized, knocking on churches and such, going, I need to be baptized, looking for spirituality, reaching out. I'm so glad I found the Dharma many years later. I have the unique experience of having my foundation in Western Dharma with teachers who are a part of the people of color group. And that was most of my teachers in the beginning. And working at Spirit Rock as a retreat manager, I was exposed to so many wonderful teachers, and I had so many opportunities to retreat. So I'm deeply steeped in the Dharma. A lot of what I say will come from the Buddhist perspective, but just know you don't have to be Buddhist. You don't have to believe it. You could put in another word if you want, but that's where my heart is. And I love sitting with the monastics. And my first monastic teacher on my first retreat was an African monk from Uganda, Bhante Buddha Rakita. And I love sitting with the nuns at Alohavahara Monastery here in California. I don't sit there when they come to out this way, or I've sat online with them. And I love sitting silent retreat. I love sitting long retreat. And what drew me to the practice was I wanted to get off of the rat race, out of the rat race and off of the treadmill. And my older brother, one of them invited me to a day long in silence and then a retreat in silence. And I was like, I've been hooked. I started meditating years ago, but that's in my bio, but I was hooked. And so here I am today, somehow landing here, speaking to all of you, sharing the Dharma, which I'm passionate about. And my teachers, everyone, a lot of people have teachers, but I've heard that the next Buddha will be the Sangha. And I feel like I'm on the cutting edge of that because I have several teachers. My first, between Bhante Buddha Rakita, then there was Larry Yang, and now I have the privilege of studying under the teachers that Larry Yang has trained, including Noliwe Alexander, who's here with us today. So, yeah, I love devotional practice. I've done some renunciation of myself for myself, and I also love laughing. I love dancing. I love basketball. Go Warriors, California. I love cheese and wine, and I love music. So as I begin to share my Dharma offering, which I've called Touching Into the Qualities of Compassion and Joy and Pain, known in Pali as Karuna and Mudita. Joy and pain are like sunshine and rain. We have them both. It's like the mud and the lotus. You need some of that grit in order to bloom and blossom sometime. And if it's not to bloom and blossom, it's definitely to have the contrast between what might be known as the pain and then the beauty in life, so that we could appreciate both and learn to hold both. So compassion, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is known as karuna in the Pali language. And part of the practice in the Buddha Dharma is practicing with what we call the four immeasurables, or the four Brahma Viharas. And you were introduced to one yesterday, maybe for the first time, maybe you've been exposed before, to metta, or loving kindness. And today we have karuna, compassion, mudita, and joy. And I believe we will be offering upekkha, another one of the Brahma Viharas, later in the retreat. Basically, they're all about love. But today I'm going to talk about compassion, which is known as a wish for all beings to be well. It's the idea of suffering with others. When I sat with the nuns this year over New Year's, Aya Santachita from Alokavihara Monastery, Aya Dhammadipa said that joy is in the Buddhist teachings. We talk a lot about suffering and, all of that, but there is joy. And again, I think it goes back to like looking at the mud, looking at the pain, and then being able to recognize and appreciate the good things in life. And I'll probably be both going back and forth. So mudita is a type of joy that is having a joy, an appreciative joy, meaning having a joy for others. And Aya Santachita from Alokavihara said, and this resonated with me, and she actually used that word resonate, that mudita, or the joy that I'm speaking about, is when you resonate in other people's joy, when you're happy for others. And you can also be happy and appreciate your own joy. So I wanted to talk about how compassion really came into my life, where I was paying attention to it. And it came through being a caregiver for my mother. She died about almost 7 years ago now. And actually my sister died first, the one that I was talking about. My sister Denise passed away suddenly. And 2 weeks later, my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And they said she had 2 weeks to 6 months to live. My family and I, my sisters and brothers, I moved in. I immediately moved in with my mom. And I must say, my other sister, she lived with my other sister. So she was already there. So I moved in with my mom into her room. She wanted me to be there. And I literally was like, by her side, sleeping on a mattress next to her bed for the last 6 months of her life, which was a miracle, because we can't live together longer than 3 months. We love each other, but we cannot live together. One time she got me an apartment. She said, Ramona, are you going back to New York? And I said, no. She said, well, there's an apartment available upstairs. So I could live in the same building, but we couldn't share walls. So when she was dying, that was I was already in the practice, thank goodness, because I wanted to be fully present with her. And because of the Dharma, because of understanding, caring for someone else with a loving heart, I was able to be fully present with my mom as she suffered, and also experienced so much joy. And this was happening simultaneously. We deepened our relationship in a way that I never imagined. She used to smoke. And actually, when they put her on oxygen, my family and I said, well, we're going to have to figure out how to take her off the oxygen and let her have a cigarette. But she quit. She quit just like that. When she left the hospital, went home on hospice, she said, I'm done. And I said, really? And the reason I was able to move in, because I had cats and she didn't like cats. One of the things I said, I put my cats in a boarding room place. And so that I could spend that time with my mother. I was there, my sisters and I too, but I'm just speaking from my story. My sisters and brothers, we were all there. I happened to be able to quit a job that I hated and was like, I'm with my mom. You know, there were tough times. There were times when she would have a coughing attack at night in the middle of the night. And, you know, I'd get up and offer her a breathing treatment or her morphine. And those were when I felt her suffering. There's nothing I could do but be there with her. You know, we did shifts, you know, to be there with her, to hold her, to try to make her comfortable. And to, I don't know, try to not change her pain because I couldn't fix it. I had to accept that this was a part of life. You know, this was an honor for me to be able to care for my mother the way she'd cared for me at that time for, I guess, about 48 years or so. You know, I would bathe her. She let me wash her hair. And that's a big deal because she didn't like anybody to touch her hair. So when she asked me to wash her hair, I'm like, oh my God, I get to touch my mother's hair. You know? She wouldn't let me cook. My sister had to do the cooking. You know, we all had our jobs. She was still running stuff. She was only 4'11" and about 80 pounds. And we were all still scared of her. We'd be like, I'm not going to ask Ma, you ask Ma, you know? So we had our jobs, but I was able to administer the medicine. She trusted me for the medicine, my sister to cook, another brother to do the business, and another brother, poor thing, we had to allow her to give him a job. So anyway, the pain that it brought up for me, I didn't want to lose my mother. However, I knew that with the Dharma's teaching, it was a part of life. And so I just knew that I wanted to be, again, fully present. Compassion is when there's an act in the heart where you feel a quivering in the heart. And I felt that quivering for my mother. You know, there was just this love and appreciation for her, this compassionate. And then the joy I had was just all the fun I had. Like she would walk to the bathroom with her oxygen tank on, and then I had a song playing and I see her in there going, what's that song, Ramona? What's that music playing? You know, so I have those kind of memories. Or memories where she's sitting in the garden and I'm in the garden and we would be out there until the bumblebee came and we all knew that it was time to go back in, you know. And now the joy, I went through tremendous sorrow losing my mom. Deep, deep sorrow to where it took years to not only see the joy in life, but to allow myself to be open to it and to accept it without guilt. Because I was in such deep grief, so much pain when she left the earth that I realized, you know, I started to feel guilty when I started to feel a little bit of joy. And I remember asking one of my Dharma teachers, you know, it's like, I'm so sad, but there's a little bit of joy, a little happiness coming up. Is that okay? Can I be in deep grief and still be happy? Yes, because they go together like sunshine and rain, joy and pain, you know, compassion, you know, seeing someone else suffering, having our own suffering as well. Ruth King, in her book, Mindful of Race, says, compassion is the wish that everyone without exception is free from pain and suffering and its causes. And that's for us as well. We too can be free from suffering. And one of the nuns said, I don't remember which one, but that, you know, suffering doesn't necessarily mean that we suffer with others, because that adds more suffering to the world. But that we are there to care and hold for and wish that others' suffering goes away, and that we can hold their suffering with as much loving kindness as possible, and just be there sometimes to offer support. And then that being there is being there for ourselves, allowing ourselves to have joy and to fill our hearts with joy. And sometimes, for me anyway, I remember that it was hard to even bring up a sense of compassion. Like when I was going through it with my mother, I didn't see it as compassion. I was just doing what I was doing. I was just in the moment. But years later, as I was going through the grieving process, I realized that there was actually a lack of compassion in my heart when it came to my sister's death. My sister suffered from mental illness, and it caused I had a lot of anger around that. Didn't know, but because I wanted to be happy, I wanted everyone to be happy, and I couldn't change it. And so I realized that I was not compassionate towards my sister. So I realized I didn't have compassion in some cases, which was difficult to face. So even though we want it, it may not be there. And so that's why today my invitation is to invite you to touch in to the quality of compassion, to the possibility that we can soften around others and our own suffering, and touch into the qualities of joy. I'm so glad I allowed myself to experience the joy. And that too sometimes needs a little bit of a boost. For example, when I got these daffodils the other day, they were closed. And one morning I woke up and they were blooming. And I said, wow. And it brought me so much joy. Just that, and it's gonna come and go, just like these daffodils are now getting old and dry. And I took them off the altar because I said, oh, I'm giving a talk. I need fresh flowers. I said, no, this is exactly it. It's the joy and the pain. It changes. It's the ebb and flow of life, both and. And I see now that it's about time for us to break out. But I'll just touch on the fact that back to my sister with the feeling the lack of compassion and grief, because I didn't have time to grieve for my sister. Because if you remember, I told you she died suddenly, and 2 weeks later, my mother was on hospice. 6 months after that, my mother died. And in between that, believe it or not, a whole bunch of people died. So by the time I realized I didn't have compassion, I felt my sister taught me what compassion was, because those feelings started to arise in me years later after her death. Seeing the absence of it made it apparent. And I wrote her a letter and said, you taught me so much about compassion in your death. I loved my sister, but my heart was tight. And so, she's gone. So I can do it in my prayers. I do it by eating a burger every now and then. I forgot to say I'm a flexitarian, but every now and then I'll have a good organic 100% beef burger or a pork chop, but in honor of my sister, or with my mom, I'll have something that she likes, like a cup of Lipton tea, to bring the joy back in. And then also my niece, my sister's daughter, suffered from the same mental illness, and she's still alive. And she lives on the street because she's just she can't get the help she needs. She can't accept it. And so I can offer her compassion. I have less anger towards her. When I see her, I ask her, hey, how are you doing, Nicole? Did you have a warm place to sleep? Are you eating? Are you safe? And I can wish that for her in my practice as well. And so I do want to share this. This is the one reading I'll share, because I feel like it kind of wraps up, the joy and compassion, that relationship, that ebb and flow, that up and down, that here and not there, and the difficulty with being with both and accepting both, really, not pushing one away and trying to pull the other ones towards us with all kinds of substitutions, but to realize that they're both a part of life, the mud, the lotus, the joy, the pain, and we apply compassion to the pain of our own pain and others, and we open our hearts to the possibility of seeing all the joy in the world. So Bhante Buddha Rakita, the Ugandan monk that I mentioned to you, says this: most people simply become confused when faced with suffering, unable to accept the difficult parts that we tend to shut into the corner and ignore. Sickness, aging, death, and pain are all unfortunate, but unavoidable parts of living in the world. And to ignore them leaves us unable to fully love and embrace others as well as ourselves. If we don't break out of a lifestyle where we run from the things that we label bad and chase the things that we label good, compassion will always struggle to arise. We will continue to suffer as our unhealthy, idealized worldview fights against the realities of life. But as we slowly learn to let go of our attachments and love others, and I add ourselves, with bravery and honesty and compassion, compassion will lead us to understand life in its fundamental nature. We will no longer need to break our experiences up into good and bad groups, but instead face both our joyful moments and our great suffering with an open heart. Thank you. And I simply invite you to explore, to touch into the qualities of karuna, compassion, and mudita, and joy, and see what arises. And allow yourself the opportunity to be with both. Thank you.